keeping your options open is great, especially right out of school. Also, staying as close to clinical practice when you first get out of school is great because you can hone in on those skills and you're building experience. So then whenever you want to move up into leadership, you know what it was like being on the front line, or the details of, specialty pharmacy.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Quality Solutions Quality Corner Show, where quality measurement leads to better patient outcomes. This show will be your go-to source for all things related to quality improvement and medication use in healthcare. We will hit on trending health topics as they relate to performance measurements and find common ground for payers and practitioners. We will discuss how the Equip platform can help you with your performance goals, and we will also make sure to keep you up to date on pharmacy quality news. Please note that the topics discussed are based on the information available at the date and time of recording. Information or guidelines are updated periodically, and we will always recommend that our listeners research and review any guidelines that are newly published. Buckle up and put your thinking cap on. The Quality Corner Show starts now.
Hello, Quality Corner Show listeners. Welcome back to the PQS podcast, where we focus on medication use, quality improvement, and how we can utilize pharmacists to improve patient health outcomes. I'm your host, Nick Dorich, and on today's show, we are continuing to recognize pharmacists as part of American Pharmacist Month. This occurs every October to recognize the positive contributions to public health and patient care by pharmacists. On today's show, we're going to speak with our guest specifically about women in pharmacy. For a long time, pharmacy was primarily a male-driven profession, but that has changed over time. Pharmacy has been recognized as a rewarding and influential career choice for women, and over time, the number of women in the profession has grown significantly and actually take up the majority of the profession. So today's guest is Dr. Hillary Blackburn, and she's made her presence felt by sharing the success of women in pharmacy and also promoting how women in pharmacy can develop their own career. With that, Hillary, welcome to the Quality Corner Show.
Hey, Nick. Thanks so much. Great to be with you today.
Hillary, to get us started for today's episode, we need to hear about you. Can you provide a rundown on your background in pharmacy and in healthcare, and tell us about what you actively do now?
Sure. So I'm a pharmacist with a decade of experience in a variety of practice settings. So I have worked in the community setting, hospital setting, specifically doing my PGY1 pharmacy practice residency at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, and then also spent some time in the ambulatory setting as well. When I moved to Nashville after graduation, I worked for an independent pharmacy friend and wore several different hats with him. I've worked for a health plan and a mail order pharmacy. And, currently I am working with the Dispensary of Hope, which is a nonprofit medication distribution center. So in this role, I'm bringing in all those different varieties of experience and, even time during pharmacy school, I spent up on Capitol Hill in DC interning for a Mississippi senator, having grown up from the state of Mississippi and rural Mississippi, and interned with the Office of Pharmacy Affairs the next summer. So, being on the Hill was great, learned a lot about policy and advocacy in the legislative process. But when I went back to Ole Miss and asked, how do I go back for pharmacy? They were like, well, pharmacy is a small world. And so the former director for the Office of Pharmacy Affairs, which administers the 340B program or oversees that, he was in that role. So a lot of different backgrounds, and have taken all of that experience and used that in where I currently am is the director of pharmaceutical services, where I oversee our formulary research, curate best practices to support medication access programs, precept students, develop partnerships with universities, health systems, and other businesses, and maintain our relationships with schools of pharmacy and pharmacy associations. And additionally, for the past 4 years, I have hosted the Talk to Your Pharmacist podcast where I interview pharmacy leaders from across the country. And in 2020, released a book called How Pharmacists Lead, where I pulled together many of the females that I had interviewed over the past few years to tell a little bit about their stories and pulled in a little bit of my own leadership journey as well.
Excellent. Well, Hillary, thanks for the background. A lot of information, a lot of experience that you've had along the way, which is part of why I'm excited to have you on the show. Pharmacists, there's no shortage of career opportunities in different ways that pharmacists can contribute to patient care, either directly or indirectly through other support. And I think your experience really speaks to that. But certainly, I've been aware of your work with the podcast. We've been connected on social media for a number of years, and more recently have had a chance to work directly together on some projects with APHA. So very excited for that and have you on the Quality Corner show. Now, before we get into today's conversation and our three questions, we're going to stop and we will hear the questions following the breakdown.
Now it's time for the breakdown. As Quality Corner show host, Nick will ask three main topic questions. Our guests will have a chance to respond, and there will be some discussion to summarize the key points. This process will repeat for the second and third questions, which will wrap up the primary content for this recording. After that, expect to end on a closing summary, usually containing a bonus question. Now that we have described the process, let's jump into the questions.
All right, Hillary, we have much to cover for today's show, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in, and we'll begin by covering the current landscape for women in pharmacy. So how are women currently represented in the pharmacy profession? And this may tie in leadership with pharmacy groups, but also frontline pharmacists, the current pharmacy school students, and in addition, who are some of those pioneers for women in pharmacy that have helped really shape their profession?
Yeah. So women make up about 50% of the US population and about 50% of the workforce. And when you drill down to healthcare specifically, women make up about 80% of the healthcare workforce. Now, that's probably mostly nursing because historically, women, even really, if you think back to World War II, that's when women really started entering the workforce, working in factories as men were off at war, serving as nurses. You think about some very prominent nurses back in history like Florence Nightingale, and back in the 1960s only 8% of women made up the pharmacy profession. But now women are 55% of the current pharmacy workforce, and females are comprising the majority of the healthcare professions graduates. And AACP quoted that in 2019 to 2020, 63% of PharmDs were female. So definitely making a shift to having more women. And then if you look at leadership, there are still gaps. So if you look at healthcare leadership in general, only about 3% of healthcare CEOs are female. And then if you look at the pharma industry, there have been two lone females serving in CEO positions. So GSK's Emma Walmsley in 2017 and Vertex's Reshma Kewalramani. May be pronouncing her name incorrectly. And then actually Heather Bresch of Mylan, who recently stepped down when they are forming a merger or a new company, Viatris. So that's kind of what the landscape of the pharma industry has looked like. And as schools of pharmacy have increased in number, there have been more deans, but it has been pretty proportionate to the number of schools. So we haven't really seen big strides in female leadership in the school of pharmacy space. If you look at pharmacy ownership, so a lot of your audience are maybe community pharmacists. About 25% of independent pharmacies are female owned. So there's still a big gap. So even though women are making up most of the profession, we still have a long way to go in terms of leadership and being represented by females in those types of roles. So we can talk more about why some of those factors are a little bit later. But that's kind of the state of female leadership in healthcare and in pharmacy.
Thanks, Hillary. And yeah, it has been progressing. Things have been changing, and change does not happen overnight. Actually, this morning I went and got my flu shot from my local pharmacy, and when I walked in, it was interesting because knowing I'd be recording the podcast today was top of mind. And I walk in, two pharmacists, two technicians at the location, all women that were there working at the location. Which, to me, being familiar with pharmacy, that's not surprising given the landscape today, but you go back maybe even 20 years or so, and that would be somewhat, maybe not shocking, but it would certainly not be the majority of cases that you're seeing. Now,
Mhm.
Hillary, I will move us to our next question and we want to talk about how has pharmacy changed for women and how women leaders are continuing to shape the profession. This next question, it may be too general, but can you help us understand some projects or ideas that are currently at the forefront of pharmacy discourse because of the efforts from women leaders in pharmacy? And similarly, we already touched on this a little bit, leadership for pharmacy organizations, be it associations, schools and colleges, pharmacy chains, et cetera. There's a lot of shifts that are occurring, and how can women be further supported in these leadership roles to make up more of a representation for leadership in healthcare?
Yeah, so I think pharmacy in general has really made some strides in being seen, having a seat at the table for the C suite. So, in general, if you look at hospital pharmacy, there have been more and more chief pharmacy officer positions rather than a director level position. And that's been really exciting to see. And there are actually two women who hold those positions at two of the largest health systems in the country. So, one being Lynn Eschenbacher, who is the chief pharmacy officer at Ascension, and the other one is Carla Miller, who is the chief pharmacy officer at HCA. So that's been really exciting to see. And in terms of, some of the major pharmacy associations, a fellow Ole Miss pharmacist, Susan Cantrell, as the CEO of AMCP, and Lucinda Main is the leader for AACP, so the organization that oversees pharmacy education. So there may be some other ones. I know in the past, Pharmacy Quality Alliance. Laura Cranston, I believe, which now a fellow Tennessean, Micah Cost, is now in that position. But I think within the associations, we've seen a little bit more of female leadership, and several female presidents with APHA over the past several years. Currently we've got Sandra Leal, and then we'll have Teresa Toll, and I think even before Sandra, we've had kind of a slew of females. Brad Tice was in there to change it up a little bit, but that's been really exciting. And then somebody like Scott has just assumed the CEO position, and I think he's done a great job, and I think he's really brought some good energy to the association. And we support anybody that has the right skill set, should really be in those types of positions. But really have seen a lot of great things happening for females and female leadership. Now, some of the things happening, or I guess movements, have been APHA Foundation has just started a Women in Pharmacy committee that I've been had the honor to be asked to join that committee. And so we're trying to figure out what all of that looks like, what the goals will be. But the kickoff for that series of events or series of kind of conversations about that will be on October 20th. And if you kind of look up the APHA Foundation, Women in Pharmacy, it's going to be really neat looking at the past, remembering our past, and looking to our future. I can get the exact title and more details. If anyone wants to message me on LinkedIn, actually I've posted about it on LinkedIn, so you can definitely go there and find it if you do not have that in your inbox. So that's great to see. There are definitely other things, happening. I think that just in general, I love seeing Chara Reed as a pharmacist up in Chicago, and she's been having like women dinner meetups that are hosted by pharmaceutical industry sponsors. So, different things that people are doing that are really creative. It's just a way to, get women together, talk about work, also talk about some of the work life balance things that are happening. I'm learning that firsthand this year with being a new mom. So it's definitely the best role that I've ever had, and can also be the most challenging and rewarding. But trying to, figure out childcare and all of those things is something that I had no idea until you're in those shoes. So definitely some fun things happening, and yeah, I can kind of continue in on some other ways to support women. I think that being able to have a network is great. I've created a platform, or not the platform, but just a community, an online community called the League, or Women in the Pharmacy Leadership League. And again, I've posted about it on LinkedIn, or go to my website, HillaryBlackburn.com, and you can find out more information there. And, men are great allies. I have many male mentors. So one of the things, I've mentioned that there's definitely a gap in leadership at the top for females. Well, if there's going to be few females at the top, they're going to be inundated with mentorship requests, right? And we know we're all really busy. Like, we're managing families, you're managing your career. There's just a lot on our plates as women. And instead of, just kind of create your own group by, actually, I've got a lot of retired male pharmacists that are serving as excellent mentors. So I probably fall into their more of their daughters and children's age. But it's kind of neat because they've got all this great experience, they've retired, and now they are like, wow, Hillary, like, let me help you in your career. And so I have talked about potential jobs. I've had them, serve in volunteer capacities with Dispensary of Hope, but just really have gotten so much value out of that. And so hopefully, other women out there, if you're having trouble finding female mentors, one, they don't have to be in our field. So they could be other business leaders, or, tap into males, and they don't have to be at your organization. Some of the best mentors can be newly retired pharmacists. So just kind of take a look for that. So,
Oh, thanks, Hillary. And I'll push us into our next question, and this is going to relate somewhat to your comments. And one of the things that I think about, and I do some mentoring with students or new pharmacy graduates often, and there's a lot of folks that are trying to develop their career path. You and I are pretty close around that same area where we're roughly 10 years out of school. We've been figuring out what our career path is and who we want to be as a pharmacist, as a patient advocate, et cetera. What other advice, or are there other resources that you would recommend to some of our more recent graduates, particularly women in pharmacy recent graduates, that can help them develop their career, help them find their voice? Because often when we're younger, we don't know who and what we want to be. And once we start working, we discover that. So are there any other details or places that you would recommend where our new pharmacists can go to help develop their career path?
yeah. So I picked a PGY1 residency, and specifically did not go a PGY2 route because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Every area of pharmacy was so exciting, and I wanted to be able to have more of a general kind of keep my options open. So I think that that is totally a great thing to do, especially early on in your career. So, you kind of have heard in my background, I changed roles a lot. This next month, I'll be at Dispensary of Hope for 6 years. But in the beginning, I really didn't know exactly, what I was looking for, or, maybe tried a company and it just, or it wasn't the right fit. And it's okay. We've got a PharmD. We're very versatile. So it's okay if you're not quite sure what you want to do when you grow up. And, keeping your options open is great, especially right out of school. Also, staying as close to clinical practice when you first get out of school is great because you can hone in on those skills and you're building experience. So then whenever you want to move up into leadership, you know what it was like being on the front line, or the details of, specialty pharmacy or whatever. Maybe you're going to be a manager for a large retail chain, and you've been a pick, you've been on the front line, you've done all of that kind of stuff. So, be patient. You're not going to be graduate and get your dream job or be promoted overnight. It often takes a while to, they always are like, must have experience. So get experience, just put yourself out there. And then, other things like be open to opportunities. There was not a pharmacist at Dispensary of Hope before I started there. So that was a pretty risky move. I found out about it through volunteering. So there wasn't any other motive for me volunteering. I did not have any idea that would lead to a potential job, but it did. And, that goes back to like developing relationships, showing up for pharmacy meetings. And when you show up, don't just, sit around and not meet anybody. I don't know how many times I go to a conference and people do not branch out from the people in their company that they came with. I'm like, no, no, no. Go sit at a table and make friends with people you don't know and like share, best practices and things. And, at the conference I was at last week with the academy, there were chief pharmacy officer or other higher level pharmacists from several large health systems. And it was amazing to hear, that the opioid protocol that Yale New Haven built in Epic was something that Oshner was interested, and they were like, oh, can we share? And so, that definitely is fostered in that academic medical center type of institution. But, I love seeing that. And you're not going to learn that unless you go and put yourself out there and talk to other people. So try to stay as general as you can, show up to things, put yourself out there, raise your hand for volunteer opportunities. You can be overloaded with too many opportunities. So, there are going to be seasons of your life when you're not married, or maybe, okay, you get married and you're like planning for the wedding and you're really busy, or okay, then you're married and you figure that out. And then you have a baby. So think about the seasons of like when you're busy or not as busy, and lean in during those times, because you're going to just have seasons of your career. And I've interviewed some awesome female leaders over the past years. Helen McKnight spoke a lot about seasons, and she was a director, and then when she had her children, she stepped down and took so you may not always take a career trajectory. You might take step back, or you might take a lateral move, or schedule could be important to you, flexibility could be important to you, just based on where you are in your career. So she said, some really great things. That was a great episode interviewing with her. Mary Alice Bennett shared some, former APHA president, shared some, and probably a mentor to pharmacists everywhere. I mean, I don't know how many students she's probably mentored over the years up in Ohio. and they've probably trickled all over. So I hope they're continuing on her legacy. But she likes to say, um, get all you can while you can. So, kind of going back to, when I was first out of school, I wasn't married. And so, but I did take a little bit of a pause. I was in a new city. And so I wanted to really embrace and have fun and enjoy the city. You're hard charging while you're in school. It's okay to take a break. And then get signed up, like join your state association, start figuring out, your national associations. Not only are you meeting people all over the country, and then you've got an expert in whatever area, like Nick's expert in quality. Great, I've got quality questions, I've got somebody to call. So continually build your network. But there's just been so many great learnings and things, gosh, over the years. And I just didn't know what I didn't know early on in my career. And so it's okay to make those mistakes and learn from those. But with experience, hopefully wisdom is gained. But yeah, just surround yourself with good people. It's always great to have mentors. Having a board of directors is recommended. I wish that I was more diligent about that. But to be honest, I don't know that I have an official board of directors, but that's often touted as a really wise thing to do as well. So
There's always a new opportunity for growth there. So it just hasn't happened yet, right? And as you were explaining the different details or what women in pharmacy can do to help grow their career, it really comes down to a lot of it being authenticity, being comfortable with yourself, with your environment, being comfortable with growth areas, meeting new people, and growing the network. I've had a mentor who told me for years, so this is not an original statement. This is that I'm saying, but the saying went, there's no such thing as strangers, only friends we haven't made yet. And taking that kind of approach or mindset to it creates really a difference. But I really appreciate all the considerations that you shared, and that yes, it is a very different environment for women in pharmacy now to be able to grow that network, to grow those connections. Even you referenced, with your league for women in pharmacy, there's several other social media networks or groups for women in pharmacy that have really expanded over the last couple of years. So the other
yeah.
part is if you haven't found something yet, to your point, go and create it. Right?
Oh yeah.
There's some beauty in being able to create things, which you've done yourself as well with the podcast and writing the book. So
Mhm.
before we wrap up, I do want to give you kind of opportunity. Any other final key points that we maybe didn't hit on based on the questions here as it relates to supporting women in pharmacy?
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I did not bring up the pharmacist moms group. So that is definitely, I think, the largest group of pharmacist women. I didn't get to join until recently because I wasn't a mom, but it is a really big Facebook network. And so, people always want to be a part of something. And so, Susie, it's neat to hear her founder's story, where she was, like, gosh, I've got mom guilt. I like missed my son's like basketball game or, whatever it was. And she started, talking with just a few other, and so she's been able to grow that over the past few years. And actually, she had the magic to be able to found Women Pharmacist Day. So the history of Women Pharmacist Day is only just a couple of years old. So I think 2017 was kind of the first year, and October, of course, being Pharmacist Month. And then the 12th, after Elizabeth Greenlee, who was the first female pharmacist, and she had 12 children. So Elizabeth Greenleaf was very busy, I'm sure, and still very able to, make a name for herself as the first female pharmacist. So there have been so many women. Susie Solomon is absolutely somebody to follow, and I've got her featured on the podcast as well as in the book. And so she's done some amazing things. There've been women all, across the way. So there've been lots of women who've kind of gone traditional career paths. And then there's kind of this like newer generation is like more entrepreneurship things are becoming more popular, or, newer areas of pharmacy like consulting, like Blair Thielemeyer has just carved out a great business model for helping pharmacists get paid for their services. And I love her founder's story that she was fired and or let go, and she was pregnant. She's like, what am I going to do? And started doing MTM consulting. So, don't ever put a determined woman in a corner because she's going to create a business and do that. I love, Lauren Castle has done some really cool things in functional medicine. That's definitely a newer area of pharmacy practice. Joanna Lewis and Jessica Louie have done some really cool things helping pharmacists with burnout, well being. Jessica even is KonMari certified, which is pretty unique. She's just really fascinating. And then, you know, women birth control, helping women get access to birth control should be pretty easy, right? And there's been some great advances in helping approve that for pharmacists, with that access across the country. And Sally Raffi has done a great job to lead that. Lots of people have been doing some really innovative things. And then, you've got people that have found a niche like 340B. I remember going to school and it wasn't a focus. Well, 10 years later, it is a big time focus. But, people that have found their niche, like Lisa Schultz, has been in a lot of different areas of 340B, from the actual provider side, working for a health system and in the safety net, to working with the APHA and the PSSC when they were doing the consulting many years ago, and 340B Health, the association, and now, with Century Data Systems is a vendor. So kind of across the circuit. So lots of different ways to be able to use your skills and do interesting things.
Yeah, I think Hillary, as you were going through some of the names, it actually made me think back in terms when I was planning out this episode, and there was a part of me that thought initially, well, I can start to list through or mention some of the women in pharmacy that have been influential for me, have been mentors, and I quickly realized that we would probably need a 4 or 5 hour episode to go through all of it. There's so many women that are doing incredible things and that are really just continuing to push the profession. So I'm not going to be giving those shout out or thank you because I know I would be missing some fantastic women leaders, and I don't want to miss anyone from that list. So I'll be doing some direct and personal call outs to make sure I don't miss anyone. But
Yeah.
Hillary, with that, we've reached the closing for today's show, and I do thank you for being here on the show to share your perspective, your familiarity with the history of women in pharmacy, and how women are in pharmacy are continuing to change the profession, continuing to change patient care. And women in pharmacy are showing up as leaders. They're showing up as change agents as we continue to push pharmacists and have pharmacists recognized as true healthcare providers and as patient care advocates. Given the changing landscape of the pharmacy profession, it's now more important than ever for pharmacists to be recognized as healthcare providers. We know that pharmacists are healthcare providers, but that needs to be recognized in many other ways, including payment for services. And women in pharmacy are going to have a huge role to play in seeing that through. Now, Hillary, as we reach the end of the episode, we always have one question for the guest that is not specifically related to our topic, but it could be pharmacy, it could be related to your career or professional work. But lately, we've been asking our guests, because we are a quality improvement show, we've been asking our guests, what new skill set have you been developing over the last year? Or what skill set or development area have you been growing in your own? Could be personal life, could be something related to work, but would love to hear from you how you have been growing as a person.
Ooh, well, the past year has really been focused around learning to be a mom. And so, learning everything about schedules and breastfeeding, milestones, all of those sort of childcare, like figuring out babysitters and all of that kind of like, oh, feeding solids. There's been a lot, a big learning curve to being a new mom. And it's also brought me closer, and I've grown so much of an appreciation for my own mom in that process. And so that's definitely been the biggest thing over the past year. I think I would also say that I'm pretty adept at the Nashville housing market these days, because we looked for a new house for over a year and recently moved in August. And I was very familiar with Zillow and house comparisons and shopping and touring those. But I will say professionally, I'm there are a few things that I've been able to get to this year, and so pharmacy associations are great. It's also good to kind of see what else is out there. So I noticed on my bosses, who's a CEO. FACECHE at the end of his name. And I'm going, well, what is that? Well, that's a fellow for the American College of Healthcare Executives. And so that's an organization where anyone that is at an executive level or moving in that direction can become a part of. You have to sit for the governor's exam after being a member for 3 years, and it's a pretty rigorous test. So I have not yet been in that, but they did offer a leadership development program this year, an inaugural one for the Middle Tennessee chapter. And I was selected to do that. We've had amazing speakers from across the gamut. Nashville is a prime location for healthcare. So we've had, the pick of the litter with premier speakers to guide us on that. Everything from HR and how the hiring process and like search firms and executive level recruiting, that type of thing, to trying to understand revenue cycle management, which, oh my, that is quite, so that's been good. I've been in a formal mentor mentee program through that as well this year. So I've kind of invested more into ACHE and have grown a lot in that way. And but just a plug, it's never too late to go back to school. So in 2019, before I had our baby, I was like, all right, I'm going back for the MBA. And I picked a program that fit our lifestyle. We are very social with friends. We love to travel. We love to be in our community, volunteering, like just so I like to have a lot of that time and don't want to be committed. I like to have flexibility over my time too. And so doing a program that was online and competency based fit really well. And then my organization was able to help with some scholarships. So take advantage of that. So, maybe your organization helps to promote continued learning and things like that. So, yeah, that's some of the quality improvement. I feel like I've been slacking this past year, but I've been growing in other ways. So,
Yeah. Well, and as you said earlier, Hillary, the trajectory, it may not be even steps. It may not be linear all the time. And you're certainly keeping yourself plenty busy there. And congratulations on the addition to the family. That's perhaps the most important part. Now, as we get to the end of the episode, we'll do want to make sure that our listeners know how to reach out to you. So if our listeners want to hear more from you, Hillary, on any of the topics that you talked today, how can they best contact you? And I'll add here just to make sure, where can they find your podcast? Where can they find your book?
yes. So, podcast is called Talk to Your Pharmacist. Apple, iTunes, Spotify, any of the other channels where you listen. Follow me on Instagram at Talk to Your Pharmacist or Facebook. And my book, How Pharmacists Lead, is on Amazon as a Kindle or hard or a paperback. And then LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way to see what I'm up to as well. So looking forward to connecting with anyone. And I always appreciate when people say, like, I heard you on such and such, or, make kind of that connection about like how or why they're reaching out, because that's another tip for, kind of making a connection with somebody that you're wanting to meet virtually, especially. So
Yeah, it's a great call out, Hillary. So if you're listening to this and you want to reach out to Hillary, make sure you let her know that you heard about her or you heard her speak on the Quality Corner show. And Hillary, again, thank you very much for appearing on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. I've been knowing that you've been active in this space for a long time and podcasting, you've been on the list to have on as a guest, and I'm glad we were able to get you on board here. But again, check out Hillary's podcast, check out her book. And for our listeners, our final message here, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. And if you have a question or topic, please let us know. Similarly, if you have a topic and would like to come on the show and talk about it, we would love that. And you can DM us directly on Twitter @PharmacyQuality, or by emailing info@pharmacyquality.com. So that's our final messages for today. And I again appreciate you, the listening audience, for the Quality Corner show. And there's one final message from the PQS team.
The Pharmacy Quality Solutions Quality Corner show has a request for you. Our goal is to spread the word about how quality measurement can help improve health outcomes, and we need your help in sharing this podcast to friends and colleagues in the healthcare industry. We also want you to provide feedback, ask us questions, and suggest health topics you'd like to see covered. If you are a health expert and you want to contribute to the show or even talk on the show, please contact us. You can email info@pharmacyquality.com. Let us know what is on your mind, what we can address, so that you are fully informed. We want you to be able to provide the best care for your patients and members, and we wish all of you listeners out there well.